Welcome! This video is about tradition in the context of the Western Islamic world. It is the second of 5 videos summarizing the findings from my PhD dissertation. The word tradition comes from the Latin traditio, which basically means to transmit something of value. Therefore, traditional Islam can be understood as the transmission by Muslims of the teachings they believe were revealed by God to the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, in the early 7th century of the Common Era. These teachings are to be found in the Quran, a book which presents itself as the last of many revelations. All the prophets, since Adam, the first human and original prophet, are presented in the Quran as transmitting the same essential message of monotheism, indeed, the same basic religion, adapted to diverse historical contexts, but constantly forgotten or altered by humans. Consequently, Muslims can identify as the inheritors of a tradition as old as humanity itself. Since the Quran instructs Muslims to follow and obey the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, Muslims consider it their duty to transmit his sayings and actions. He represents the exemplary human model to follow when trying to apply God's teachings. The Quran and prophetic example are therefore the essential elements of the Islamic tradition, which I describe as a metaphysically inspired, dynamic flow from the past into the present and future. In addition to the dynamic image of a flow, it might also be useful to think of tradition using the more static image of overlapping concentric circles. An overarching circle is Islam, which developed in constant interaction with non-Islamic traditions, such as Christianity, Judaism, and Hellenic philosophy. Sunni and Shia traditions represent smaller circles within Islam, and they also comprise many even smaller circles. Within Sunni Islam, the Western Islamic tradition also contains many regional and local circles or traditions observable in the lands neighboring the Atlantic Ocean. The first Muslim to reach the Atlantic in 682 was the Arab general Uqba ibn Nafi'. Apparently, he would have liked to have spread Islam even further than the northern Moroccan coast he had reached, since he reportedly exclaimed, "Lord, if only the sea had not stopped me." Within a few decades, Islam expanded northwards into Europe and southwards across the Sahara. Many of the merchants and warriors who led this expansion were locals who adopted the religion of the newly arrived Arabs. Several rival Islamic currents competed in the Western Islamic world until, in the 11th century, a dominant regional tradition emerged. This tradition converged around 4 central currents: Sharifism, Maliki jurisprudence, Ash'ari theological doctrine, and Junaydi Sufism. Sharifism refers to a profound respect for the descendants of the Prophet Muhammad, blessings and peace be upon him, who are designated by the Arabic word sharif, which literally means noble. Unlike Shia traditions, Sunni Sharifism does not consider it mandatory for Muslims to be led politically by sharifs. However, many Sunnis do accept or prefer Sharifian rule. For example, Morocco is ruled by a Sunni Sharifian monarchy which perpetuates a political tradition begun in 788 when the first independent Muslim dynasty in the Western Islamic world was founded by the Sharif Idriss I. His wedding to Kenza, the daughter of a powerful chief of the local Auraba tribe, symbolically marked the beginning of Morocco's mixed cultural heritage in which Arabic and indigenous Amazigh lineages constantly intersect. Sharifism and the other 3 central currents in the Western Islamic tradition are discussed at length in my dissertation. The aim here is to provide Enough of a summary to arouse your interest. Maliki jurisprudence is one of the four major Sunni schools interpreting the divine law to determine which actions are mandatory, preferable, permissible, discouraged, or forbidden for Muslims. Ash'ari theological doctrine is one of the main Sunni schools of thought concerned with distinguishing orthodox from heterodox beliefs. Junaidi Sufism refers to a spiritual current usually transmitted within the regulated contexts of orders, and known for its scrupulous concern for legal and doctrinal orthodoxy. It coexists throughout the Islamic world with other Sufi currents, which can be categorized as ecstatic and socially nonconformist. Sufism is concerned with the experiential knowledge of metaphysical realities. The inner states and external conduct of individuals who attain this knowledge are characterized by the Arabic word ihsan, which can be translated as beautiful excellence. Sufi saints as well as sharifs represent embodied models, perpetuating the prophetic example of beautiful excellence within the framework of normative law and doctrine. In the 8th century, Idriss was considered a spiritually blessed, Sharifian ruler whose power was both spiritual and temporal. But not all sharifs are considered saints, nor are all saints sharifs. Sharifs physically inherit the prophetic bloodline, whereas saints inherit the spiritual tradition of the prophet, peace be upon him. One could add that scholars inherit his formal teachings, warriors his courage, and continue indefinitely with other types of traditional inheritance. Understandably, people within whom converge multiple traditional currents are considered especially blessed. Two such people are the 12th century northern Moroccan Abdussalam ibn Mashish and his disciple Abul Hasan al-Shadhili, after whom a prominent Sufi order is named. Both men were descendants of King Idriss. Through their heritage, education, and influence, they embodied the emerging convergence of Sharifism and the Maliki, Ash'ari, Junaidi combination. Although many people reject aspects of these four normative currents, they have been strong enough for all other currents within the Western Islamic tradition to evolve in relation to them for the last millennium. Over centuries, many sciences, occupations, behaviors, and ways of being have arisen which represent flows, subcurrents, and countercurrents within this tradition. In the African lands connected to the Sahara Desert and the Atlantic Ocean, and in the European lands now called Spain and Portugal, a whole variety of traditions and customs flourished in the pre-colonial era, including ways of speaking, moving, working, eating, loving, singing, washing, and all the other aspects which comprise the rich tapestry of daily life. This dazzling variety expressed a distinct conception of what it means to lead a good life based on certain ideals of beauty and excellence. Contemporary scholars of the Western Islamic world, such as Sylviane Diouf, Alioune Traoré, Ousmane Oumar Khan, and Vincent Cornell, have all noted that the entire region was united by commercial, intellectual, cultural, and spiritual networks which were in turn connected to the broader Islamic world spreading across much of Africa and Eurasia. These scholars are pushing back against colonial narratives which artificially separate Black African Islam from North African Islam and Andalusian Islam. Indeed, Eurocentric scholarship often presents Andalusian Islam as a European civilization, superior to African Islam. Yet the historical record is filled with evidence which contradicts this narrative. Diouf mentions the case of one 14th century African king. She writes, Mansa Musa of Mali, who on a pilgrimage to Mecca in 1324 spent so much gold that he single-handedly drove the gold market down, brought back to his country lawyers and descendants of the Prophet Muhammad, as well as a Spanish-born Muslim architect, and sent numerous students to North Africa. This is but one of many examples demonstrating that the whole pre-colonial Western Islamic world was united by a common understanding of the good life, which also influenced people of other religions, such as Andalusian Jews and Christians. It should also be noted that some of the manifestations of this approach to the good life were, frankly, scandalous from a normative Islamic point of view. For instance, Andalusian courts were famous for wine drinking, dancing girls, and Arabic poetry celebrating various forms of eroticism forbidden by Maliki law. But these controversial aspects seem only to increase the awe and wonder Andalusian civilization has long inspired. In the 10th century, a Catholic nun from Saxony named Horoswitha described the Andalusian city of Córdoba as the ornament of the world. Contemporary scholar Maria Rosa Menocal borrows this expression as the title of a book in which she describes the city as an astonishing place with 900 baths and tens of thousands of shops, as well as hundreds or perhaps thousands of mosques. Menocal reminds us of the hundreds of thousands of books collected in over 70 libraries across the city. In contrast, during the same period, she writes that the largest library in Christian Europe probably held no more than 400 manuscripts. When discussing the Andalusian civilization, ruled for centuries by people of African descent, sometimes called Moors, the late scholar Jan Carew wrote, "Different Moorish cities came to be known for their particular forte. Córdoba for its libraries and collections, Seville for its music and musical instruments, and Toledo as a center of industry and learning, but all shared a common feature of highly sophisticated urban management and unbroken seminal connections with the land. Moorish cities were noted for their public hospitals, public baths, lighted thoroughfares, hot and cold running water, magnificent religious monuments, the grandeur of their mosques, gardens with exotic plants and even more exotic birds, and beautifully designed fountains." Carew is right to connect the wonders of Al-Andalus to Islamic Africa. During fieldwork in Morocco and Spain, I observed no major break between the Muslim ways of life which developed on both sides of the Gibraltar Strait, in cities such as Granada, Malaga, Gibraltar, Tétouan, Tangiers, and Chefchaouen. Instead, I detected an underlying aesthetic, a mood, even a taste. Books such as Fez, City of Islam, by the late Titus Burckhardt, attempt to evoke this experiential dimension, which can only be partly conveyed by photos, music, and videos, as well as descriptive and even lyrical writing. Without an appreciation of this experiential dimension, it is impossible to fully understand the disruptive impact the emergence of the modern colonial European project had on the Western Islamic tradition. This disruption is the subject of the upcoming third video of this series. Until then, salam.